Today marks 100 days that the country has been free from load shedding, which is the longest break in 4 years. Eskom's new leadership has been praised for its efforts to keep the lights on, while Electricity Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa has been retained in his portfolio in the 7th administration. Ramokgopa joins us for more on this and, of course, other issues that have been added to his portfolio. Congratulations are in order once again, Minister, but also thank you for your time this evening.
Good evening, Bravoyo, and thank you very much for the invitation, and good evening to the viewers at home.
Well, 3 months of no load shedding. We haven't seen that in years. Great news, as one analyst said to me yesterday, but we're not out of the woods just yet.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I think it's a major milestone, not necessarily a moment of celebration. The only time we'll celebrate is when we are able to say with some degree of confidence that we have defeated load shedding, we have created sufficient buffer to allow the South African economy to grow. But I think it should not escape on us. I think the magnitude of the achievement, sometime the similar period last year, we're sitting at stage 6 load shedding from time to time. So it's a significant progress, far exceeding our own expectations. And I think that talks to the issues of leadership at Eskom from the board, chaired by Dr. Mteto, the leadership at the management level under the stewardship of the group executive, Mr. Marokane, and more importantly, the team at Generation. And of course, it's also a reflection of the efficacy of the strategy that has been employed and executed at Eskom. The fact that the fiscal support that was received from National Treasury was appropriately allocated, that is the capital, to ensure that we are able to maintain the Eskom assets, and we're beginning to see the results now. I mean, we had ramped up planned maintenance to levels that had not been seen in the recent history of Eskom. We reached about 18% of the total installed generation capacity. December transitioning into January of this year had been taken out on planned maintenance. That's significant, 9,000 megawatts. And we did make the point that when these machines are coming back, we're likely going to see the improvement. And yes, we are yielding the results of that improvement. And as you have made the point, Braden, we're not out of the woods yet. And that's why the team is transfixed on the resolution of this problem. We're looking forward to retaining unit number 4 at Medupi sometime in September of this year, 800 megawatts. We hope to finish the work that we're doing at Quebec unit number 2, an additional 980 megawatts sometime in November of this year. And also we're looking to synchronize unit number 6 at Kusile, another 800 megawatts again in September of this year. So when you aggregate those 3 units coming from those 3 different stations, so there's a potential of another 2,500 megawatts just coming from Eskom's fleet. And of course, we're doing everything possible to accelerate the onboarding of new generation capacity from the private sector, and also working aggressively to make interventions on the demand side so that we're able to use the electricity more efficiently. And once we see those results, again, on the back of the fiscal incentive that has been provided by National Treasury, what we call the behind-the-meter intervention, when people generate electricity for their own consumption, you'll see that there's less and less reliance on the grid, and we'll be able to use this additional capacity to support or power the economy, the recovery of the South African economy. Bravo.
Now, Minister, I mean, but what about these personalities specifically? And I'm talking here about the chairperson, Mteto Nyatu, whom we just mentioned, CEO Den Marokane, the old head of generation as well, so Kumalo. But what about them, the personality, has actually brought about this change outside of everything that you have so eloquently spoken about just now?
I think we are understating, if you like, what I refer to as soft issues. I think the power of leadership, what you refer to as the personality. So what is common about these three gentlemen, and of course a number of people who are supporting them at the board level. I mean, if you take time to look at the composition of the board, you'll see that it's men and women of exceptional experience, impeccable credentials in the energy generation space. So they bring a wealth of experience from various energy sources. Some have got expertise in the area of nuclear, renewables, and some of them, Dr. Mteto in particular, turning around struggling entities. So when you aggregate all of this under one umbrella with a common objective, you are likely to see the kind of results that you are seeing. And of course, on the back of that, they were able to make an inspired appointment. Even before they appointed Mr. Marokane as the group chief executive, they took the view to appoint Mr. Bheki Nxumalo. At the time, we had Mr. Caleb Kasim as the acting group CEO. And Mr. Nxumalo is someone who cut his teeth within the ranks of Eskom, an exceptional track record of service to this country, many decades at the Eskom, and moved across a number of units at Eskom. So what's the point there? Is that you are likely going to get the best result when you harvest the internal skills and also drawing from the investments that you have made over a period of time. And this is necessary in a complex and huge organization that is Eskom, because he had an appreciation of the nature of the problem and what are the major touch points for us to be able to get the kind of results that we are getting. And he also identified men and women with the right qualities to go and make interventions at what I refer to as a problematic power station. Problematic in a sense that they account for over 70% of the losses. So we identified these 6 stations and was able to place people with the requisite experience there. And of course, much later, the board then makes the appointment of Mr. Marokane, who had been at Eskom before, coming into the ranks. I mean, for him to understand the landscape at Eskom didn't take him very long. He already knew the players there. And that's why there's some degree of alignment between the board, the management team, and the levels that reports to the management team. That's very powerful, because I think if you look at the story of Eskom, of course, we'll get to tell it much later when we have resolved this problem. You will see that the people issues were at the center of the recovery effort. Really, there is no significant assistance that we are getting from outside. And I'm not suggesting that we are not getting any assistance. But if you look at Hendrina as a power station, Kendall as a power station, what we are doing at the Tutuka as a power station, those are some of the power stations that were complicit in the kind of intensity of load shedding that we had experienced. It's about the people issues. And those are the same people who have turned around these entities. A set of incentives were put in place, normalize the employer-employee relationship, harmonize the workspace, and ensure that you place the right people in the right position.
Yeah.
And of course, performance measurements, consequence management. And that's how these people have turned it around. It's the people at Eskom who have turned this situation around. So it's not a magic wand. It's not someone from outside, but essentially a general appreciation that once you are able to harmonize that employee-employer relation, create a set of incentives, a performance culture, you are able to turn even some of the most, what appears to be an intractable problem we are solving. But I want to emphasize, we are not yet out of the woods, Bravo.
Of course, I mean, the turnaround is also coming on the back of Eskom's biggest corporate customers, but also, I mean, households, ending their dependency or reliance on Eskom. In fact, trying their best to not depend on Eskom. Is that not going to be a problem for Eskom's sustainability in the long run?
Well, 2 parts to that. You're absolutely correct. So if you look at the Energy Action Plan, which is a primary driver of turning around the energy situation in this country, it's got 5 outcomes. And one of those outcomes is to accelerate the rollout of rooftop solar solutions by households and industry. So what is the point that we're making in the energy action plan? Is that you need a multiplicity of energy sources to be able to address the energy challenge in the country. So when households go the route of rooftop solar solutions, including industry, and supported by a suite of incentives that have been introduced by National Treasury to sweeten, if you like, that conversion into renewable forms of energy. It must be seen as part of a total package of intervention. So they are not necessarily saving Eskom, but we are creating, if you like, variable sources of energy so that we are de-risking the problem. There's no over-reliance just on one source. I think it's important to make that point. But yes, you are correct to say that if this is not managed correctly, you are likely going to see that your best paying customers, energy-intensive users, are likely going to go the route of self-generation or entering into power purchase agreement with independent power producers. But what Eskom will be doing, and it's something that I'm sure will be announced in the next few weeks or so, it's a conversation we started before the advent of the 7th administration at the tail end of the 6th administration, was that Eskom should not just be a buyer of renewable energy sources, but Eskom must be a player in the generation of renewable energy sources. So when you go to some of the power stations that are going to be decommissioned sometime in the future as a result of our commitment to the nationally determined contribution, the net zero path, there's a rich body of science that suggests that increased emissions have got a relationship on the intensity of extreme weather occurrences like drought and floods, as we're seeing in many parts of this country. So we've got an obligation to go that route. So we'll do it at the pace and scale that we can afford as a country. But Eskom has to play in that space. So it's important that when you get to a point of decommissioning, Eskom's participation and presence on the generation side is not displaced. By that I mean Eskom must defend its position as a major generator of energy in this country. And that's why we're also going to look at the new generation capacity. And what that does, Braden, is that your major or energy-intensive users are likely going to procure that green and clean energy from Eskom because of its proven track record and the fact that they've got internal expertise and capacity to deliver on their promise. So as we displace what you call dirty forms of fuels and going greener, you'll still find that Eskom will be participating in that space. So Eskom should not be afraid and is not afraid of the transition that we are seeing, but Eskom must reinvent itself and play in that space. And I'm confident that in the next few weeks, you'll see that they're having had an engagement with the board. Like I said, it's a conversation we started before. Eskom will play in that space so that you don't see an employment bloodbath, people being taken out of jobs as a result of this transition. At the minimum, the net impact on the employment will be zero, but I'm confident that it will be positive. We'll get more and more people into the space.
Where were these conversations taking place? Were they taking place among yourselves as ministers dealing with energy, out like you, a Gwede Mantashe, Pravin Gordhan, or were they happening within the broader ANC? Where exactly?
Well, first is that we are informed by the Integrated Resource Plan, which is a comprehensive articulation of the various energy sources that must support and power the South African energy landscape, the immediate requirements and also going into the future. And I think what the crisis has done, it has pushed all of us to think differently on the various sources of energy. So these are conversations that has been happening in the party. If you go to the resolution of the 54th National Conference, we do make the point around the need for us to transition what we call the just energy transition. And we provide South African characteristics of what we mean by just, the just part of the just transition. So it's a socio-economic element. So it's not necessarily the center of gravity of that conversation is not just the environmental and ecological consideration, but it is that plus the economic consideration, issues of energy security and universal access. So you need to address that part, the 4 areas of interest for us to be able to transition. And then you should also address the issue of energy affordability. So one of the fronts that are confronting us now, Braden, is that there's an exponential increase of cost of energy in the form of tariffs. And we're quickly getting into the situation where many communities are experiencing what I refer to as energy poverty. What do I mean by that? Electricity is there, is available, Eskom is generating, but many of these households are not able to afford the energy because it's expensive. So it's eroding their disposable income. It's got inflationary pressures. And that's why you see there's many communities that are experiencing this. And of course, you can see the tariff increases that started on the 1st of July. They are prohibitive. They are going to undermine the ability of communities to be able to access electricity. So we need very urgent and difficult conversations around the electricity pricing in this country. One of the discussions we just concluded today with the team, together with the Deputy Minister Samantha Graham, is to say that one of the key priorities is to work on the energy pricing plan. We are pricing people out of access to electricity. And this is a major area of discomfort, and it might result in social discontent. And then the third one, Braden, that the second one that requires attention is the collapse of municipal distribution infrastructure. Some of us did caution about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, before the advent of COVID, to say that if you look at the rate of investment in the maintenance of municipal distribution infrastructure, is such that in the next 2 to 3 years, at the time when we're articulating this problem, we are going to experience a situation where municipalities are unable to provide the kind of electricity or infrastructure to support the reticulation or distribution. What's the situation as I speak to you now? There's a major problem in Johannesburg. There's a problem in Tshwane. I'm suggesting to you that in the next few months, you will see that the problem is across the country. And that's why these municipalities are implementing what they call load reduction. But in the eyes of the consumer, it just doesn't change the equation. Their experience is that there are hours of the day where they don't have electricity. Whether you call it load shedding or load reduction, their experience is the same. So we need to resolve that problem. And I always make the point that I've not been appointed to define the problem, but you must go beyond defining the problem and say, this is how we're going to resolve it. So we've already engaged with the newly appointed Minister of Corporate Governance, Honorable Hlabisa. We're going to make those interventions. We had already started in the 6th administration. There are proposals that we had placed before Minister Nkadimeng. Of course, there's a change of leadership in COGTA. So I think we should just privilege the new minister with what we think are some of the solutions.
Minister,
otherwise,
can I just go in there? Because the issues you've just mentioned are issues that we thought, or we had been told, some of them, that they were being tackled. If we go all the way back, even when Didi Mabuza was the deputy president, we were told that these matters were being handled at intergovernmental level, but we are yet to see the fruits of those conversations. But also, the issues you've been talking about of tariffs, this issue has been with us for the longest time. And you look at what Eskom is asking for right now, and it doesn't look like anyone, has been listening. And if you look at even the issue of the just transition, there is a sense that the government has actually been shy to make that point to all and sundry. That is, that it's in the public's interest, that we generate energy from whatever source we can get at the moment, and make the point that for the next 10 years, at least, we are going to rely heavily on traditional thermal sources of power.
Maybe absolutely correct. So let me say the following on those three questions. So the first one in relation to investment in distribution infrastructure, you're absolutely correct that former DP Mabuza was leading this. The situation is a bit more complex on the distribution side, because if you go to the Constitution, which is a preeminent document that assigns functions, amongst others, across the three spheres of government, it says that distribution is an exclusive terrain of local authorities. So essentially, you are relying on the bona fides of municipalities to invest in the replenishment and maintenance of this distribution infrastructure. And that's why National Treasury put out the guidance in relation to how you package a budget to say that 8% of the budget should be directed toward maintenance. Less than 1% of municipalities are directing more than 2% to maintenance. So this thing has caught up with us. And that's why I'm saying you need a design that does not necessarily take away or usurp the powers from local authorities. But that design just appreciate that the responsibility sits with local authorities, but local authorities have not been in a position to allocate capital for purposes of replenishment and maintenance as a result of a combination of both subjective and objective reasons. And therefore, there has to be a nationally designed intervention on how you are going to maintain distribution infrastructure. And like I said, we have a set of proposals, and I really prefer that I engage with the newly appointed Minister of Culture so that there's a symmetry there. And then on the second question on the issues of pricing. Pricing, of course, is NERSA. It's an independent body. Is the one that approves, if you like, the submission by Eskom as the bulk energy producer in this country. And of course, in that algorithm of how they determine whether the pricing is cost reflective, is also a function of the fuel sources. So as a result of load shedding, we have seen that over time we had relied on open cycle gas turbines, and we have run them. They are on load or their load factor. The periods in the day that we are exploiting the open cycle gas turbine, which uses diesel as a fuel source, and diesel is the most expensive fuel source, that has resulted in the kind of escalations that we are seeing. So the more we're able to build this thermal power, energy, as you put it correctly, the backbone of energy generation in the country, and the conversion of some of this OCGT from diesel to be powered by gas, improving the efficiency of the performance of the coal plants, we are likely going to see that the cost of production comes down, and that will be passed on to the end consumer. But again, in that equation, if you go into new sources of generation, of course, they are non-dispatchable, they're intermittent, they are not necessarily available throughout the day. But I think what they do is to help you to have a balanced mix, and they've proven to be cheap. I mean, we've just did a number that when we went to a study, the first bid windows, I think we're paying about the unit cost was about R3.80. And today, as I speak to you, is about 56 cents. The same applies for wind and solar. So as a result of investment in technology, the cost curve has come down, and you should be able to pass it on to the end consumer. And then the last point I want to make is on the reforms. If you look the Electricity Regulation Act now, it introduces new players. So once you introduce new players, the assumption is the following. And this assumption is found to be valid, by the way, in many other parts of the country. When you have a multiplicity of generators, because they are increasing competition, it means that they are likely going to invest in technology. So technology adoption is going to be very high, and that will result in efficiencies. Efficiencies result in less cost associated with production, and you are able to pass it on to the end consumer. So those reforms are revolutionary. They are transformational in nature, and we need to support them. Without necessarily, Eskom will not be displaced. The point I made earlier on, Eskom will continue to play in that space. Eskom has got the inside track. Eskom has got a head start. the largest aggregation of energy expertise in the country is located in Eskom. Eskom is sitting on large tracts of land, real estate. Eskom has got access to the grid in the areas where you are likely going to be decommissioning some of these power plants going into the future. You transition into gas to power and including renewables. So you are going to address that those questions that we have raised. So the energy ecosystem in the country is going to change and change dramatically. And I want to argue that it's a crisis induced. If you didn't have this load shedding, there's a downside. The downside is that it's really obliterating the South African economy. People are out of employment. The levels of poverty increases. I mean, you can model that. The Reserve Bank has done those numbers. But I think the opportunity is that now we need to think creatively. We must see opportunity in the crisis, and that opportunity must be taken within the life of the crisis. And as we abate load shedding, you are going to find that in the 7th administration, before the end of the year, in the next 2 months or so, you will see that there will be major movements in that space, including taking care of the poor, because there is a new phenomenon that is emerging. It is only the affluent who can afford these new sources of energy solutions, and the poor are left behind. So we're going to repurpose some of these grants to make it possible for the poor to access these forms of technology. And they are likely going to be the major beneficiaries out of this exercise.
As we wrap, Minister, very, very quickly, please. I'm sure a lot of people would like to, would have been, you know, the fly on the wall when the president made those calls or called you in for a conversation. What's the one thing that you remember, or that he said, or that stood out for you when he made that call and said, not only are you returning to this portfolio, but also that I am reconfiguring this portfolio? What's the one thing that stands out from what he said on that day?
That he has expanded the flow of options. So you are not just restricted to just one element of energy, but in fact is the entire complex. Watch this space, you will see we are going to reconfigure this. We are going to broaden the industrial base, introduce new skills, fight the issues of energy hunger, energy poverty, reskill our people to participate, because there are existing instruments that have not been sufficiently exploited in a creative way to take advantage of this crisis. And South Africa will reclaim its unassailable position as a leader in the area of research, new technologies, and advancement of society's interest. Bravo.
Now, I mean, there have been times when people felt that ministers were tiptoeing around issues to avoid big conflicts or cat fights among comrades. I mean, now that you have so many people and ministers from a whole range of political parties who may not necessarily be your best friends, and some of them will not be shy to show you up or raise the level of debate and conversation. They will tell you to forget about your egos and comradeship in the nation's interest. Are you all alive to that reality and how you are supposed to handle it going forward?
Oh, the resolution of the energy crisis is a science. So it has no appeal to emotions or rhetorics. I mean, there's a science, there's a rich body of evidence, and I'm not underplaying the political economy of energy, but the resolution of this problem is scientific. It's going to be supported by data. If you've got a view that is diametrically opposed to what we are putting behind, present a set of facts. So you can't just use emotions and slogans. And I'm confident that myself and the DM we are aligned. I'm very confident about that, and we'll spearhead, if you like, the recovery effort on the energy side and exploit the natural endowment that this country has. And when I come and present to you, you'll see that this is a science. So it doesn't use any hunch. There's no abstract, really just supported by data and a rich body of evidence that exists in other jurisdictions in the world, and will illustrate to the country that on the back of this intervention will broaden the industrial base. Like I said, the new research capacity, new research areas, reskill our people to benefit in relation to the just transition. And South Africa will be a better and happier place going into the future, brother.
Minister, let me thank you for your time and indulgence. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.